Hi everyone, welcome to THT, and today we're going to talk about the tournaments that happened during the UK Game Expo. And I just returned from the event myself a few hours ago. Returned from Birmingham, and it was an excellent event. And we're going to deep dive into what happened there and what we can learn from it. First of all, the metagame. As you may know, there were not only one but three tournaments happening during this weekend. So one on Friday, one on Saturday, and one on Sunday, each with their own structures. And we're going to take a look at what was the metagame in each of those tournaments. First of all, this was the metagame from day one. On day one, there were a majority. The matchup was pretty much what you could expect. A majority of Boba, Sabine, Daz Vader in third, Aiden following very closely after. I think the only anomalies here is I would say Han Solo a little bit underrepresented, maybe Luke a little bit overrepresented. But other than this, pretty much what you could expect. A couple of unusual decks at the bottom as usual. The Era Syndulla actually did very well during that first tournament here with a 66% win rate. But other than this, the win rate is about 50% for every deck. We just had Luke underperforming quite a bit at 40%, and the Vader decks overperforming at 58%. This was the metagame for day 2. So as you can see, I think a meta that is, in my opinion, a lot more representative to what you can expect. Boba still coming out strong, Sabine coming after, and Han Solo going third. So we've seen the rise of people playing Han Solo in the recent events. So I'm just gonna move my camera here so you can see the win rate: 55%, 48% here, 55% for Boba, 48% for Sabine. Yeah, Han Solo has grown in popularity and has been doing very well on the second day with a 59%, almost a 59% win rate, which is very good. Vader this time completely crushing down the 36% win rate on day 2, despite having a very strong day 1 in terms of win percentage. And then the rest of the meta is pretty much what you would expect. Krennic this time came out as the 5th most played deck, and Luke once again with an abysmal win rate at 30%. Era Syndulla did not manage to repeat the success that she had on day 1. So that's the second day, which was a separate tournament, and then finally the third day, which was its own separate tournament as well. And this time around, again, Boba Fett, Sabine, Han Solo. This time Iden Versio coming out as the 4th most played deck. I think one of the reasons why we saw a lot more Iden on day 3 is because Iden won the day 2, so I think a lot of people maybe got inspired into playing Iden for that very reason. And then Leia got quite a bit of play, but unfortunately did not achieve a very good win rate. And the rest is pretty much what we would expect. Good win rate for Palpatine, but here sample size very small at 5, only 5 players playing Palpatine, and Vader about 50% as well. So yeah, pretty much what you would expect for the meta. Boba, Sabine, and Han Solo basically confirming that it's the 3rd most played deck. We've seen Han Solo basically being very played in the Text Initiative league, and I think it confirms to be with every tournament it's been confirmed that Han is the 3rd most played, most popular deck in the game. So now we're going to deep diving into the different lists that managed to make it to the top cut of the first day. So first day was best of 1, 7 rounds of best of 1 in top cut. So obviously, my usual disclaimer, of course, is that despite this tournament being really high level, these are only best of 1s, so sideboards pretty much are irrelevant. And obviously best of 1s are by nature a lot less reliable than best of 3, because you're only playing one game. So the amount of data so I think that the data that you get from a best of 3 tournament is about like twice less reliable, because you get twice less games being played at the very least. Basically 2.5 less games if we assume that a match goes to game three. So there's like a lot in terms of the amount of info and the amount of game that are being played. It's not the most reliable data because of the best of one, which is not really the way the game is supposed to be played. But that's what the organizer of the organized play OPE decided to do. And I'll go later on what I think about the best of one format, but basically just take all the results of those tournaments with a grain of salt, because even though they did have a top cut and a respectable amount of rounds, the best of one nature of the tournaments really had some impact on the results because it made everything like a lot more random because obviously only one game. So there's a lot of people that maybe would not have made it in the best of the tournament who had a lot of success, and on the other way around, some people would have a lot of success in the best of three tournament, did not have so much success in best of one because obviously if you're playing in the best of one, basically if you play the more games you play, the more likely the better player is going to come out on top. Or the best of one basically favorize upsets. It favorize players who are maybe not as good, or maybe it also changed the matchup. So for example, a matchup that can be a very bad matchup, you can, if it's only a best of one, by an accident or just by sheer luck, you can simply win the best of one. While if you're playing best of three, when you're playing a bad matchup at a best of three, it's going to be far less likely because in this case, in order to be able to win the match, you're going to need to win the match twice. You're going to need to be lucky twice to be able to win that matchup. So by nature, best of one is a bit more random and gives a bit more chance for underdogs to perform, which obviously skews the results. That's basically the big disclaimer for the best of one. So this is the top 8 here for the disclaimers. So for the as you can see, mostly British player, because obviously on Friday it would be mostly local players who will be able to free themselves so it's pretty natural. And here this was a very heavy Boba dominated top 8. It's been a while since we've seen Boba dominating so much in a top 8 of a tournament. Last time was also in England during the Twickenham tournament, where it was a top 8 full of Bobas. This time we have 5 Bobas, 2 Sabine, and 1 Vader. Um, so we're gonna go through the different lists, starting of course from Scrub Games. Um, he was playing a Vader blue deck. So this is like the classic control list, but a couple of interesting originalities. First of all, he's playing a lot more red cards than we used to in the control decks. Only 1 copies of Emperor Palpatine, which is shocking to me. I find Palpatine to be one of the strongest reasons, in my opinion, to be playing right control is Palpatine. So, a bit surprised to see only 1 copies of Palpatine. But the rest of the deck is just what you would expect. I mean, you see the 4th throw as well being played, which is another reason why I'm surprised to not see Palpatine. Obviously, it's a 4th unit, so I mean, obviously those 4th throw are meant to be played when Vader comes out. But if your Vader has been defeated, then those 4th throw become pretty much just a discard 1 for 1, which is not super ideal. I think 4th throw is an excellent card in control, so that's the reason why but so it's kind of a cool idea to see 4th throw being played in a control unit less, but then I don't understand why it does not play 3 copies of Palpatine. So it'll be very interesting to know what is the reason why he's not playing three copies of Palpatine. Also see Force Surrender, which pairs pretty well with Palpatine to try to attack the opponent hand, on top of controlling what's on the board, also controlling what your opponent hand, which is a traditional version of a control list would not be able to do. This version can do it, which is pretty cool. Also Bombing Run, which I think is a pretty decent card in a mass control deck. We haven't seen so many people running it, but I think it's a card that is good, especially if you have a Search Your Feelings toolbox. 3 copies of Repair is definitely way more than what we are accustomed to, and the rest of the deck is pretty much what you would expect. Charleston, I don't know how good Charleston would be in a deck like this, because there's a lot of non-blue card in this specific version. And then a lot of anti-control card. There's a lot of Aspect, Bounty Hunter Crew. The no good out of Aspect, no good to me dead, probably for the hand matchup, I would say. And then the Change of Heart, I can really take some ones by surprise, but in this case it was open deck list. Someone was open deck list. I'm not going to comment too much on the sideboard, because pretty much the sideboard only mattered for the top cut. Only the top cut was played as a best of 3. All the other game was played as best of 1. So especially since he lost his first top 8 games. I'm not gonna pay too much attention to the sideboard. He only lost to Boba. Big annotation playing Boba. I think he was playing Boba yellow, so managed to win against everything else. He did not face many aggro deck, which I think is fairly fortunate for him because I think Vader Blue does not have a good matchup versus aggro. So the fact that he didn't meet a single aggro deck the entire tournament is pretty lucky from him, and I think that also tremendously helped him getting into that position. So yeah, he faced a lot of Boba, Luke, so a lot of mid-range deck, which is exactly what you want to be facing whenever you want to play a control deck. And he did lose to aggro in the semifinals. So well done. But I'd be very curious to know what is the reasoning behind only one copy of Palpatine, especially as he's playing 4th over. Definitely an interesting concept of bringing in the discard on top of all the removals. Next we got someone playing as a Boba Green. So it's a fairly classic Boba Green list. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. It's as classic as it gets. It's just I think the only originality is the out of aspect Spark of Rebellion in the main deck, which is probably an attempt to make the control matchup slightly better. But yeah, the rest of the deck is very much what you would expect. He only lost to Boba, Mikelo, and Stroll Sword. And he did not face any control deck unless Mutsumano was playing the Vader was playing Vader control, but I don't know about that. But yeah, pretty favorable matchups overall, as you can see here on the list. Except that the Vader, I think all those matchups are pretty either even or positive matchup for Boba. So then we got another player. This time playing as Boba Yellow, and this time this is once again a fairly classic Boba Yellow list. I think the only small originality is the Jabba the Hutt, which is something we've seen before. I think it's an attempt for Boba Yellow to have a 4-drop that is good against control. I think this 4-drop slot has been moved around. Some people have been playing. I think there's the anti-aggro option, which is the Gamorrean Guards. There's the kind of anti-mid-range, kind of flexible, which is ATRT. I think ATRT is a little bit more kind of like it depends on the matchup. But it's a bit more. It's good against. It's decent against everything. It's not amazing, but it's decent against everything. And then Jabba the Hutt is clearly the anti-control approach because you got a very tanky unit that's not gonna. If your opponent has to kill it, he has to dedicate a Vanquish to it, which is quite a commitment in terms of resources and also having to spend a Vanquish on this, while you would rather keep your Vanquish to deal with the Fire Sprays. And so you got a unit that is relatively difficult to kill. That's going to be attacking every turn, being a target that you can use it for cunning, for surprise strike, and possibly sometimes it can also get you an extra card. So it gets you a shoot first or a waylay. Fairly unlikely though. He's only playing 6 trick in the deck. Jabba is not worthy of you playing a bunch of tricks in your deck and to make the Jabba odds better. However, if you basically people usually consider the tricks just as a bonus. It's just a plus, right? If you get it, it's nice. But other than this, it's okay not to get it. So a lot of people have been saying Boba Yellow is stronger than Boba Green because Boba Yellow is slightly better versus control. And the reason for it is because of obviously access to Body Rook alongside Cunning, which are 2 excellent cards versus control. With all that being said, you also do lose a couple of great assets versus control, which is the ramp and also Vaders, but I think people consider that Body Rook and Cunnings are better against control overall. And also, some people also say that Boba has better matchups as aggro, which is definitely possible. So all those factors makes it so people have been recently kind of switching towards playing Boba Yellow, and we almost have the same amount of presence of Boba Yellows and Boba Green. Almost came out like relatively 50-50 in the tournament. Both of them making results, as you can see, but Boba Yellow slightly overperforming Boba Green. I think my opinion is that both decks are really good, and I think that Boba Yellow might be slightly better positioned in the meta, but if it is, it's not by a lot. It's not a huge difference. So I think you can bring either of those options in the tournament and feel pretty good about it. And both decks are going to be very good. So that's kind of my opinion. I don't think I think if Boba Yellow is slightly better positioned, I think it's only by a little bit. It only has a small difference. One other thing as well with Boba Yellow, right, is that I think Boba Yellow is a deck that is a little bit less consistent than Boba Green because Boba Green has every card is kind of like pretty good. While in Boba Yellow you have a couple of excellent cards. So for example, you got Cunning at 4, and you get access to Body Rook for 3. And those cards are just amazing when you can find them. But if you don't find them, then the deck is a lot weaker. While I feel like the power level of cards in Boba Green uh, um, is a bit more even. So I think that Boba Yellow by nature is just a little bit more random because it really depends a lot more on finding those very important cards, especially in the mirror match. So you can see he lost to I think once again Boba Yellow, and he lost to Sabine in the quarterfinals, and he won against Han Solo, Boba Fett, Aiden. Once again, some pretty good matchups here. Shirut's pretty good matchup, Leia pretty good matchup. So overall, some pretty good. He didn't face a single control deck, I believe. So unless Aiden was a control deck, then. But okay, cool. Moving on. I think another thing to say as well in the best of one event. Um, um, in the best of one event, Boba Green has a lot of strong sideboard options versus control. Like they play like Relentless. They have access to Relentless. They have access to Emperor's Legions. Like a lot of powerful anti-control card in the sideboard. So if you're going to be playing a best of one event, you're more comfortable playing Boba Yellow. Because Boba Yellow has the anti-control cards fit perfectly well in the main deck, while playing Relentless or Emperor's Legions into your main deck as Boba Green is a lot more awkward. So this is also, I think, in the best of one event, Boba Yellow definitely is favored. I think so. The next is the list of big O notation, which happens to have won a couple of good mirror match, and he was actually undefeated on the first day, and then he lost in the top 8 versus Boba. I think that was a Boba Green that he lost to, which is not a surprise because Boba Green has the reputation of having relatively good matchup versus Boba Yellow. His deck is pretty much card for card exactly the deck that I've posted in my on my channel. So my video that is about 2 months ago. That is my video deck tech about Boba Yellow. This is literally the same list card by card. Using the Mining Guild TIE Fighter as an quote-unquote anti-control cards, and then with the Frontier ATRT as the 4 drops. I don't even think I would play a version like this today because this video was quite old, like 2 months ago, but it seems to have done very well with it, and I think it's still a very solid choice. And I think also, especially true in Boba Yellow, I don't think those few differences make a massive difference in the grand scheme of things because people are going to be resourcing quite aggressively those kind of not so amazing cards to focus on the great card of the deck, which are always the same: Bouncer, Fire Spray, Cunning, No Good to Me Dead Body Rook, Boba Greedo, and that kind of stuff. So I don't think that changing a few 5 cards in the deck really makes that big of a difference anyway. So great performance, and moving on now to the next list. So we got another Boba Yellow list. This one, once again, very similar to the one we've seen before. One copy of Jabba's, one we go Jabba's, Swoop Racer has a bit of a split. Once again, doesn't really make much of a difference. It's mostly the same deck. And we'll move on now to our first Sabine list, the Sabine Green. So during the previous 4K, 5K tournament, we've seen Sabine Green players basically giving up on Echo-based Defender. Um, and instead try and play high health units like R2D2 and I forgot the name, R2D2 and Bright Hope. And here we see that this is not at all what's happening here. We see the Echo-based Defender more closer to the old school list that we've seen when the game first came out. But the main originality of this specific version is the 3 copies of U-Wing reinforcements in the main deck, which I believe is the key to counter control. If you're playing, so a lot of people have been saying the Sabine Yellow is better than Sabine Green because Sabine Yellow does better against control, and the main reasoning behind that is because Sabine Yellow plays Falcon, which is extremely good against control, but Sabine Green also has amazing tool against control that people have been overlooking for way too long, and that's Ewing Reinforcement. Ewing Reinforcement is an amazing, amazing card against control. It's a great way to repopulate your board. When your opponent, even if you're playing aggro, games will go long versus control because there's so many ways to gain HP as the control player whenever you're playing Aiden, especially if you're playing a blue Aiden. So you need to have a way to kind of repopulate your board, put tons of pressure on your opponent, and even dig deeper into your deck to find ways to prevent your opponent from healing. So I think the combination of Wolf plus Ewing Reinforcement is something that I've personally advised in my video about how to counter control. And I think that Ewing Reinforcement Wolf is really the key to help in this matchup. So he is playing the Ewing main deck. I don't know if I would necessarily advise Ewing main deck, but maybe that's because we're playing best of one, so it was like, okay, might as well play the Ewing main deck. But as a cost of not having the spec for soldiers, which I'm sure was probably a very big problem in some matchup. In this case, he's been facing a lot of Krennic, so being able to win 3 games versus Krennic is pretty impressive. And I wouldn't be surprised if he managed to grind those games out thanks to Ewing Reinforcement. Um, Ended up losing to Boba Yellow and another Sabine deck in the top 4, but one against Shirut. So yeah, I think it's a pretty good deck, and I think playing Ewing Reinforcement is going to be, moving forward, I think it's going to be the standard if you want to fight for control. You're going to need Ewing Reinforcement. Is it going to be in the main deck, or is it going to be in a sideboard? I don't know, but I think it has to be somewhere in the 60 cards. And I think this will most likely fix the issue of this matchup. Next, we got a Sabine Yellow list, which is what a lot of people have been preferring recently. Like, a lot of people have been saying, well, Sabine Yellow is better positioned in the format. The same way people are saying that Boba Yellow is better positioned than Boba Green. People say Sabine Yellow is better positioned than Sabine Green in the current meta. Because 30 HP base really helped a lot in the mirror. Not having ECL also is having ECL is a big deal. But I think a lot of people saying Mirror Falcon definitely helps a lot against control. In this case, interestingly, he only lost to Shirut and won versus and lost to Boba Fett at the end. I think that was a Boba Yellow that he lost again, Mikelo. So those are bad matchups. So Shirut is kind of a balanced matchup. So, but once again, best of one. You can't really draw any conclusion. It's just just you get bad draws. Anything can happen. It's a bit. It's very volatile. So about this list, I think it's fairly classic Sabine Yellow list, the way we've seen being played by some players like Rebel Resource. Maybe the 3 copies of Sneak Attack is a lot. This Sneak Attack is a strong card in the deck because it pairs very well with K2SO, pairs very well, especially with Fleet Lieutenant. But having 3 of them is definitely a lot, so I wonder if there's been like a lot of situation where you just were stuck with that card and not be able to do much with it. Or if you just always manage to find a use for it. Also, the 2 Bamboozle main deck, probably very good versus, it's good probably against in the mirror match, and also quite good as a counter to Lieutenant Charleston. So that's probably helped a lot. The rest of the list is pretty much what you expect from Sabine Yellow list. Moving forward, we have so that's the list of Mikelo, yeah. So that's the one that he won the entire tournament, taking a loss versus Boba Green, and then basically winning everything else. So congratulations to him for a strong performance. So for about this list, there's only one thing that is truly different from other Boba Yellow lists, and that's the 3 snapshot reflexes compared to as opposed to the shoot first. And I think snapshot reflexes is an excellent idea because shoot first very good against aggro, but not so good against everything else. Snapshot reflexes, however, is a much more versatile card that I think is good in a number of matchups. Like, I think Snapshot Reflexes is a lot better versus control because it's a way to add pressure and boosting your units to basically play around cards, like allows you to play over Vigilance, so you're boosting the health of your unit to prevent it from being a target for Vigilance. Also very good to basically play around a takedown. So I really like Snapshot Reflexes in Boba Yellow. I think it's a card that's still very strong versus aggro. It performs a similar role as Shoot First, but it's useful in a wider amount of matchups, and especially against control, since it's also a permanent attack bonus, also nice. So I think it's an excellent idea. The rest of the deck is pretty much what you would expect. We got some Headhunters, it's not unheard of. We see some things seeing play this from time to time, and the rest of the deck is pretty much what you would expect. So that was basically the day one top 8. So when are we gonna go to the day 2? Day 2 was the same, 7 rounds, best of 1. So just so you know, to give you a bit of perspective on how difficult it was to make it to the top 8, basically you had to go 6-1 in the top 8. And I don't know if you guys realize how difficult that is to go 6-1 in best of 1. It's very hard. Any bad luck, any misstep, and you're out of the race. It's very unforgiving. So huge performance for people to do that in 6-1. You really need to be both a good player and you also need to be lucky on your matchup because it's so unforgiving. Day 2 is the same format, best of 1, 7 rounds with a top cut on best of 3 at the end. And here's the top 8. So we got 1 Iden Blue, then we got 1, 2, 3, 3 Boba, and I think out of those 3 Bobas, 1 is green and 2 is yellow, I believe. And then we got 3 Han green. So that's a strong showing for Han. I think it's the strongest performance in tournament from Han. So we had some strong performance with Han in Take the Initiative, doing the Take the Initiative tournament, but obviously this league is still a fairly small tournament when you only talk about the top cut. I think in a major tournament, I think this is the strongest performance for Han, and a good signal that this deck is a real thing, and reinforces its position into the meta. So first we got the list of Jake Mooney. So I also completely forgot to mention, sorry, yeah, to Jake Mooney, sorry. And so that is the list that he brought to the tournament. So as you can see, there's basically 2 big trends in terms of hand green list. There's the hand green list that are closer to my version, where I basically play no rebel at all. And there's the more rebel-centric version. And this is definitely a more rebel-centric version. As you see, he plays the Rogue Operative, Ezra Bridger, Echo Base Defender, Wing Leader, Fleet Lieutenants. And and the other interesting things about this list is that he also plays pretty much no 2-drop and 1-drop whatsoever. So he doesn't play Greedo, he doesn't play Battlefield Marine. And so basically the strategy here is to basically always play a 3-drop on turn 1, which is something that is obviously pretty powerful. Playing an Ezra turn 1, Rogue Operator turn 1 can be quite oppressive if your opponent doesn't have the answer for it. And the plan is to basically never play a 2-drop and 1-drop. And I'm not a big fan of this personally for 2 reasons. The first reason why I don't like that personally is because it basically makes it so you have to use Han's ability at a very turn, and that really restricts you in terms of cards, and you don't have infinite amount of cards. And as you can see, his version pretty much has no way to draw cards. He doesn't even play Momothma, which I think would be quite a decent card in this deck, to be honest, since he plays so many Rebels. So he doesn't play Rogue Squadron Skirmisher either. So basically he has, which is normal because he basically played no 2-drops. So I don't know how he doesn't run out of cards, because he has to play Han's ability on turn 1, and he's most likely going to be playing it for the Han big turn. But that's really going to put a lot of pressure on your cards. So it's going to be very limited on cards. And personally, me, when I'm playing Han, I like to have the options to go 3-drop on turn 1, but I don't like to be obligated to do so, because there are situations where you can be very punished for doing that. If your opponent just like kill the 3-drop without too much trouble, then he's doing a 2-for-1 out of the gate, and that doesn't feel very good. And so me personally, I like to have the option to be able to not use Han's ability right at the gate. And the other reason why I don't like that, don't like not playing any 2-drops and 1-drop, is because it makes your Ewing reinforcement a lot worse. So here, because what he's going to see from his Ewing is most of the time he's going to find double 3-drops, because he plays a tremendous amount of 3-drops. If he plays so many 3-drops, I even think that he should be playing 3-3PO, so to be able to get some free cards from him, because he plays, how many 3-drops is he playing? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, plus the resupply. That's 7 by 3 is yeah, pretty much almost like 18 3-drops. That's really a lot. And not only that, so it makes your Ewing reinforcement a lot more awkward, because he's going to go double 3-drop. You're not utilizing the full 7 value. And this is one of the things that Greedo is excellent. I love having Greedo because it always allows you to go double 3-drop plus a Greedo. You get an extra unit from it, which is I think is a big deal. So he's either gonna have to go double 3, or he's gonna have to go for the big Han. So it's a bit awkward. He only has one 4-drop, so he can go 4 plus 3. But yeah, most of the time he's gonna have to go double 3, and I think it's a big loss that he's not getting. He's really making his Ewing reinforcement a lot worse against uh because he's not playing Greedo. Also against aggro. So turn one 3-drops can be good against aggro, but also you're giving up the initiative. So if you had the initiative and you're playing a 3-drop on turn 1, that can be a problem as well. So not a big fan of this, but it turns out very well. Definitely maybe there's something I'm missing about this. Obviously, I play a lot of hands, so I have a very strong opinion about it. But obviously, I'm here to learn and to unlearn the things that I think I know and see if there's something I'm missing here. And I'll be very happy to hear from anyone on the reasoning behind playing so many 3-drops and what are the main advantages for doing so. Another top 7. So on 7th position we got another Han, and once again we see the same kind of build, very similar build than previously. Once again, I'm not paying attention too much about the sideboard because, as you know, it pretty much almost didn't matter. So it's pretty. I'm not going to comment too much because it's almost the same version. This one was piloted by Josh, and I just want to shout out because Josh is actually a person who actually booked a lesson of coaching with me. So he actually benefited from my coaching. So I'm really glad and I'm really happy to see people who've been benefiting from my coaching manage to do some performance in tournaments. I also want to talk very quickly about Homestead Militia. I think Homestead Militia is a very good card in hand. The only thing is, like, most of the time I don't really have the space for it. The reason why I personally don't play Homestead Militia is because it's not heroic, so I cannot bring him back from Home 1. But I acknowledge that the card is very good in hand. Just a 3/4 sideline is just very solid, generally speaking. And then him having Sentinels is a big deal. And that's the reason why you also see Ezra. Ezra has the same qualities, but the ability is a lot more situational. I much prefer Homestead Militia's ability. If Militia was heroic, I would play Militia over Ezra any day. Didn't talk about the matchup so he lost to Boba Fett, lost to the Mirror Badge. Okay, one double win against Krennic is impressive, and the rest is pretty good. And then we've got an Iden green mid-range deck, almost like an old school version, playing only one copy of Vigilance. So Iden green is a deck that's been here from almost the beginning of the game, but has never managed to, like Iden green mid-range, but has never really done any performance in tournaments. So it's nice to see that finally someone managed to pilot Iden green into a strong finish. Because this deck has always kind of like Krennic has done consistently good results. Krennic Green mid-range, but Iden Green mid-range not so much. I still, if you guys wondered, I still prefer Krennic over Iden in that type of decks of mid-range deck. But I also acknowledge the fact that there's not that big of a difference between the two, and they're both pretty solid deck, and they're not that different from one another. Anyway, so the version itself is not much to say. It's playing ECL. It's pretty much what you would expect. Honestly, there's as many versions of this deck as there's players who play them. Like, there's just so many different viable options in this color combination that you can play a lot of different things. As you can see, he's not playing any sideboard, which is probably was bad for him during the top cut, but obviously didn't matter during the Swiss phase. And as you can see, he's trying to get ready. It's really kind of obvious that he really built his deck for best of one because he's really kind of spreading around the different options and hope that he's going to draw them at the right moment. Trying to basically be ready for anything, which is very hard to do. But yeah, solid list, of course. And we're moving on now to so I think it was a Polish player who was piloting this list. Pretty good. As you can see, it is a Boba Green that is built against control, so it plays the Body Rook in the main deck. So Body Rook with aspect penalty, of course. Also 2 copies of Relentless, so very well prepared against control. Unfortunately, this did not prevent him to lose to an Iden blue in the top 8. but he didn't manage to win against an Aiden earlier and also against a Palpatine as well earlier as well. So I wonder how useful those cards were. I would also be this matchup probably got caught on camera, so I will definitely be eager to look at the coverage to see what happened in this matchup here because he has so many tools. So for the control matchup, I wonder what went wrong for him very specifically. So that's basically a Boba green list that is built against control, and even the sideboard was even going as far as bringing the Chimera in the sideboard. Me personally, I still think that Relentless and Devastator, even against control, is a far better card. So I'm not a big fan of Chimera, but I've seen Polished player really um, saying a Chimera is actually pretty good against control. Um, and I it's not like I don't think it's bad against control. I mean, it's probably pretty decent against control, but I just think there's just better option. I think I would rather play just more copies of Relentless, more copies of Devastator, or simply Emperor's Legion. Anyway, that was a sideboard, and in this event probably didn't matter too much. I wonder if he managed to play the card against in the top 8 here. I don't know. That would be interesting. But yeah, the rest of the list makes a lot of sense. It's just basically, as I said, an anti-control Boba Green list is kind of what it's trying to be. Obviously, it sacrificed some things to make it happen, but overall, that's the idea of the deck. Moving on, we got once again a Boba Yellow version. This version is very classic here. Yeah, not much to say. So yeah, no, it's really classic here. Not much to say. Boba Yellow still performing well. And then we got I think it's Sarah, who managed to who did the best performance with Han in this day 2 tournament, and he was playing his own version of Han Green, which is definitely quite different from other things I've seen before. Um, it notably plays 3 copies of Patrolling V-Wing, so I also used to play Patrolling V-Wing in my version, but I was not playing all 3. This is, for me, it was just a toolbox card for U-Wing reinforcement that is pretty good against control, but here he's really committed to it with all 3 of them. So for people who are wondering, you play Patrolling V-Wing over Mon Mothma because Patrolling V-Wing gives you the guaranteed draw, and you don't have to play so many Rebels in your deck. He's not playing a very Rebel-centric version of the deck, so it makes sense that he's not playing Mon Mothma. Yeah, so that's pretty much the main reason. And then the rest of the list is pretty much what you expect. He's also playing Frontline Shuttles. It's something that I've also thought about because it's a good counter to No Good to Me Dad. If someone basically No Good to Me did your Han solo, you can use Frontline Shuttles to be able to attack with Han anyways, assuming there's a unit to attack, and then you get your extra resource and you get to ramp, which is very nice. And it also works well with Han's ability. Han's the 6/6, so you get to ambush, you get to attack. That's pretty good. It also works quite well with Agent Callus. Very good with Reinforcement Walker as well. So maybe I would like to. I should basically give it another chance. I just find him to be I find Frontline, generally speaking, to be super situational, and I've never really given it a fair chance. But maybe I should give it another go, because it's definitely an interesting synergy. It has definitely interesting synergy in his deck. Yeah, so he actually basically won versus Aiden. I think that was an Aiden Blue, if I'm not mistaken, or like an Aiden Control deck, which is weird because his version is very well equipped versus Control. So the only main criticism I have with this list is the fact that he's not playing Battlefield Marine, and I think this probably makes the control match, the aggro matchup a lot worse. So he's not playing Battlefield Marine, and he's not playing the Liberator gunship, which pretty much I would say would be a huge problem versus aggro. I think that not having those cards in the aggro matchup is a big deal, and I don't think your V-Wings and your Frontline Shuttle are really helpful in the aggro matchup. As a result, I mean, he got lucky here because you can see he hasn't faced a single aggro deck during the entire tournament. So I wonder how his list performs against a more aggro list. But strong performance to be able to beat 2 Vaders and 1 Palpatine, that is a very strong performance. So maybe this version is better suited versus very grindy mid-range controlling matchup well, maybe in those matchups like V-Wing is like super helpful. Yeah, this deck as opposed to the previous list, which really depend on you going for the extra resources to be able to play a 3-drop on turn 1. This version, though, has a lot of ways to draw cards right from the beginning of the game. Plays the V-Wing, plays even the Agent Callus, plays the Bright Hope. So a lot of ways to draw cards compared to the other version we've seen. So probably very helpful in this kind of grinding matchups. Next, we got another Boba Green list. So you can see Boba Green still doing pretty well in the tournament. I forgot to mention here, but Cunning also seeing a lot of play in Boba Green. It is something that I've seen a lot of Polish players do, and it seems to be doing pretty well. As is a card that is very good at racing, so I think against aggro it's very good. Against control it's not bad either, so I think it's a good idea. And here we see it once again seeing a significant amount of play. And no good to me dead, absolutely not in the main deck here. So I wonder if that has been an issue with Ansolo. He still managed to win against Ansolo despite that, and winning against both Ansolos in the top 8. So looks like not having no good to me dead was not an issue at all, which is definitely interesting. And he ended up losing against control. I mean, this deck is not particularly well built for control, so I can see why, even though he has some good sideboard, but maybe the sideboard was not enough. Once again, I would like to see those games and see what happened. And finally, the list of the winners. So we already talked about this player. He's called Ethiel Arik. That's his pseudonym. He's also known as Ki E-A-U on it's pronounced Ko. He's a French player, and on the Discord. And this player, in my opinion, is one of the best control player, at least in Europe. He's been really playing and winning a lot of tournaments in France, and he did a top 8, top 10, sorry, during the Twickenham tournament a while ago, and it's actually he's the first player to make. So everybody remembers about the player who did who won the 5K Orlando with Vader Blue, and that's really the moment where hard control became like a super big deal. But Ko was really the first one to make a significant performance with hard control, and he was one of the first to play that hard control style decks. And he's been playing it since until then in different variants, and this time he decided to go with a blue ident. So also when I made that video about Dominatrix ident, the video I made about it, I was mostly playtesting with him to actually tune the deck and basically formulate myself an opinion about the deck. So it was obviously very useful for me to. So this time he goes with the ident, so Dominatrix blue version that is really based on make your opponent suffer. I just want to emphasize on how difficult it is to play a deck like this in long tournaments, because every of your game is going to go time, so you have to be playing very quick to be able to get through the motion and to be able to finish your rounds. So it's obviously always impressive to see those kind of decks doing so well in tournaments. One of the main advantages of the Vader version is like you can actually kill much faster, but this deck is really incredibly slow. So what can we say about the deck itself? Well, it's pretty much what you would expect from Iden Blue. It's not like those decks have a lot of room to do things different. I think the regional governor is kind of like something we've never seen before. A lot of people consider it to be a little bit too fragile, too easy to kill. But here it seems to be worked pretty well, to have worked pretty well. It's probably I don't exactly know in what matchup it's really that amazing. Maybe against aggro it's very good because you can say you can name a card that you think is going to be problematic, and the aggro player is unlikely to have a removal for governor. Anyway, as I said, in blue you don't really have that many. In double blue you don't really have that much room to play something different because you want to play your reduced cost vigilance. So yeah, Iden Blue, it's definitely not a fluke from the Richmond tournament. It is something that is here to stay. It's such a powerful deck. So in the sideboard, very interesting with the Galactic Ambition Relentless, but he hasn't. This is obviously a deck that is meant to be for the mirror control. If there's one deck that can play that combo, it has to be this one because Iden has so many ways to gain HP back. So it's obviously meant to be a tech for the mirror of control. But obviously he cannot benefit from that sideboard during the Swiss, and during the top 8 he only basically faced Boba, so I don't think he ever played that combo in the tournament, so don't give too much credit to this particular tech. Um, and then we're moving on to the day 3, which was a best of 3, 6 rounds with no top cut whatsoever. And this time, so we got the top 8, but I also wanted to include another player called Eduardo, which actually went 5-1 in this event, and most likely would have been able to make the top 8 if it was not for what I consider to be an outrageous um, judge decision. So basically what happened was that a couple of mistakes have been made during the game, but basically those mistakes were corrected, and the game basically moved forward, and it was issued a warning against that player. And basically what happened is that at the end of the game, the behavior of Eduardo was considered to be aggressive, and therefore the judge decided to upgrade those warnings into game losses. And everything, according to what I've been told, everything basically happened after the game was already finished. So, which is, in my opinion, quite outrageous. It's like either you see if anything that Eduardo did was judged inappropriate, it should have been, or aggressive, it should have been told on the spot by the judges, which were really much there. So it is a bit weird to do everything after the fact. And also, me personally, I don't like people who get offended on the behalf of other people, because I've also talked with Eduardo's opponent, and he does not report the behavior of his opponent to be any particularly aggressive, and which means that the judge pretty much got offended on the behalf of the player. And I think this is another problem here. Like in my opinion, if there's any so yeah, I just don't understand what happened here, but this seems to have been so. As a result, Eduardo basically been disqualified for the tournament, and he should have been 5-1 from that token, which does not guarantee him a top 8 position, I believe, but I think almost guaranteeing him a top 8 position. So I just want to repair that injustice by including him into this review. But yeah, some pretty weird judging decision. If anybody has a better idea of what happened, I talked with Eduardo, I talked with his opponent as well. But if anybody from the organization has more insight to give me about what happened exactly, and maybe can correct me on that, I'll be glad to hear it. So I'm gonna include into that top 8. So basically Vader. So here on this day, so keep in mind also that this was only 6 games. Even though those games were played on best of 3, this was only 6 games being played and no top 8, no top cut whatsoever. So once again, take all those results with a grain of salt. It's not the most competitive structures that we've seen for sure. So here we see 1 Aiden, 2 Vader if you count Eduardo in the addition, a Palpatine, an Han Solo, 2 Boba Fett, so and 2 Aiden. So a much more diverse metagame, and we've seen basically aggro players disappearing to the top 8 progressively. So moving on now to Eduardo's list, was playing a Vader Green, pretty much a mid-range. So classic, I would say, Vader ramp. I think it's kind of like Vader ramp now are moving away from ECL, and it's confirmed now that I think it's pretty solidly confirmed that indeed Command Center is indeed the way to go for the Vader decks, because it really helps tremendously against control. And Vader was not benefiting from ECL so much. It was benefiting from ECL a lot, but not as much as having those 5 extra HP. So the rest of the deck is pretty classic. We got the General Veers being played here, which is a good combo with Vader. You can actually one-shot a Han Solo by doing that, which is very useful. And Veers overall just a solid card, especially when you play a Cell Block Guard as well. Yeah, just a very solid list with also the Force Lightning and sideboard. Though this time the sideboard very much mattered because it was the best of 3 event. And Force Lightning is mainly against the other ramp deck to disable the Super Laser Technician is the reason why he has them in the sideboard. And a very anti-control focused sideboard, as you can see here. Most of the aggro decks, aggro cards are anti-aggro cards are in the main deck, the Yularans, and all that stuff. Then we got John playing as Aiden Red. So a list that is actually very close to my original Aiden Dominatrix list, but this time he's playing Tarkin Town, which is very brave. Really, you do miss a lot those 5 extra HP, but having this extra removal, I guess, can be very useful in some situation. Playing the Bombing Rung in the main deck, and also played Delmico, which is interesting. Another card we see very often, even in the double blue, we don't see that very often. I guess it's quite good in the control mirror. And then we can see the sideboard. We have a Smoke and Cinders. I didn't know we would see the day where we would see the day where Smoke and Cinder would see play in the sideboard, or even in any part of the deck. During Spark of Rebellion, I've considered this card to be one of the worst cards in Spark of Rebellion. It is obviously a toolbox card for the Search Your Feelings engine. I don't really know. I think the situation in which this card would be useful would be very, very rare. I'll be curious to know if we ever manage to cast this card in a competitive game and how it performs and what situation it is theoretically good. If you're really looking for a card that hand destruction, I think I would much rather go for Force Surrender, but sometimes it can be difficult for an aggro deck to deal the damage required for Force Surrender to trigger, so maybe that's the reason. Moving on now to another Boba Yellow list. This one is once again a very classic list. There's not much to say about it. So Jabba the Hutt. I can search for Sneak Attack. Interesting. I wonder how many times he used the Sneak Attack. So I just want to go back. So here he lost to a Krennic. Interesting, because Krennic Green should be a pretty good matchup for Aiden. So I wonder what went wrong here. And then basically Boba Yellow lost to Palpatine. One against 2 Han Solos here. Definitely. Boba Yellow still has a positive matchup versus Palpatine, so it's not really much of a surprise. And then we got Krennic. So this time it's the player. Forgot his name. Twilgrim, yeah, Twilgrim. Who was playing Krennic Green, so Krennic mid-range. As you can see, no Vigilance, just pure mid-range. Pretty classic list, I would say. It's what you would expect the Krennic Green to do. I wonder how useful just playing 2 copies of Restock is against Control. I wonder how often that actually mattered. As you can see, he won against me. Very good player. I mean, this is not a great matchup for Han, to be fair. And the game went pretty bad for me. Like, he had all the strongest late game card you can imagine. And he lost against Palpatine, which is not a surprise. Palpatine, a very good matchup versus Krennic, I would say. So, not much of a surprise. And then moving on to an red list. So far, every single list we've seen so far were pretty much solid meta decks. This is the first list that is honestly a little bit outside of the meta, which would consider to be a little bit more tier 3, I would say. Everything else we've seen is either tier 1 or tier 2. And here Han Solo red, and is exactly what you would imagine an Han Solo deck would play. So it's kind of aggressive deck, but also ramp into some very big things. We get Gary Attack Pod, Mace Windu. Even Mace Windu sees his moments of glory here. Only 2 copies of Han Solo is also surprising, but it's a fairly aggressive version playing the 4 cause I believe in. This 4 cause works on everything except the Surprise Strike. So it's aggro Han, it's aggro red Han that we've seen that before. But here it basically sees play, and he basically lost to a Vader and won against everything else. So definitely interesting. Yeah, it's not. I'm not particularly surprised by anything he plays. I think it's fairly classic for things for the Han Solo red. Even though Han red is not really the list that has an established deck list, I would say. Next we got once again the Boba yellow list, and as you can see, so if I'm not mistaken, this is once again Mikkel. Yeah, big O notation, and once again big O notation making a top 8 performance with the exact same deck that he played on day 1. So this is once again the same list that I've published on my channel on my yellow boba video. So once again, making a big performance here. Well done. And he lost only to Vader, which I'm not surprising. Vader is, I would say, has a pretty good matchup versus Boba Yellow. And then finally we got another. Though that's the same player, Ko, also playing the same that won the day two. Playing once again is Iden Blue. When I said this player is one of the best control player in Europe, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. He's just very good at deck. Um, Next we got Palpatine making a performance, and this one was undefeated. Got himself 6 wins at best of 3. Playing Palpatine Blue. I both like Palpatine Blue, Palpatine Red. They both have their advantages and inconveniences, but they're both very solid decks. And this one is a very, very control-focused version. As you can see, he's playing the 3 Super Laser Blast, the 3 Vigilances, even the Restock, the Entrench. But he's really kind of at the middle between 2 different playstyles, because at the same time he plays all those super hard control cards, but at the same time he also has a mid-range approach. We can see he has Vader, he has the Emperor's War Guard. So it's kind of like saying, I'm going to take the best out of the mid-range RAM Palpatine, and I'm going to take the best out of hard control, and I'm going to put them together in one perfect package. And this is kind of what he did. The only question I have with this approach is that those two approaches kind of compete with one another. For example, if you entrench an opponent unit and you have a ball because you have played Vader, it becomes kind of a problem. So entrench is kind of its big downside. And the other prime also is Super Laser Blast when you have a Stormborn presence because of Vader can be a problem as well. So I'm not those two different approaches kind of work against each other. But he had a very strong finish, so he did very well. Sideboard almost entirely dedicated at dealing with control, hard control. Once again, using the overpowering approach, Relentless, and the Spark of Rebellion to get rid of the enemy cards. That's basically what he does. Yeah, so as you can see, he managed to beat 2 aggro decks, which is very good, because I'm assuming this deck should have a pretty poor matchup against aggro. It does have quite a few ways to win life, but I'm still not confident this deck has a great matchup versus aggro. But yeah, managed to do very solid performance here. And then finally, the person who came out with 6 wins, even winning against Ethel Archie and his Iden version, Iden Blue. I think Iden Blue, it was commented before as well that Iden Blue has trouble versus Vader Green. So Vader Green has a good matchup versus hard control decks, and I think that's one of the reasons why we've seen Vader Green pulling some pretty good performances, because this deck has strong matchup versus hard control, and that's a big asset to have. About his deck, there's a few things I really strongly disagree with. Only playing 2 copies of Palpatine for me is criminal. I think Palpatine is one of the biggest reasons to be playing Vader Green. Palpatine is so incredibly strong. Once again, I would want to hear the reason why people only play less than 2 copies, whether it's in the red-black control list, or whether it's in red-black ramp list. I would really be curious to hear what is the reason why they're playing less than 3 copies of Palpatine. The rest of the deck, though, is very much what you would expect. The Vader's lightsaber is interesting. I found this card to be a little bit too situational, personally, but if you can play it in the right time, it's very strong. I like the TIE Fighters in this list because whenever you play against aggro, you're very vulnerable in space until you can get to, in this case he's not playing the Constant Survivor because he doesn't have the Energy Conversion Lab, so you kind of need to have some ways to interact with space in the early stage of the games, and I think TIE Fighter is one of the only way to do this, and you can go TIE Fighter, ping with Vader, and you can kill a 3-drop, which is very nice. And then the sideboard has a big stuff, only 1 copy of Relentless, so not particularly well equipped for the control, to fight against control, but it does have 3 Devastators. But I think just honestly, even without the Relentless, this deck has pretty good chance versus control, generally speaking, if you know how to play against it. So something I wanted to say about that, after talking a lot with Ethel Archie, so the guy who was playing Iden Blue, is that he told me that one of the reason why blue control is very strong is not so much because of the deck itself, it's also because it feels like there's a lot of people who don't know how to play properly versus control. And I think that's very true. I think there's a lot of people who still don't know. They know what card to play, they know what kind of card to play, but they don't know really how to play. And here's the thing, playing against hard control is completely different than playing against other decks. So I think this is also one of the thing that makes the deck very successful, is that there's simply a lot of people who just don't know how to play against control because it almost feels like playing a different game. So I feel like Iden Blue in generally and other hard control decks, I think they would be a lot worse if people knew how to play against them a little bit better. Okay, so now we're jumping into our learnings when we went through all the different lists. So what are the learnings? What can we learn from this tournament? Well, the first thing I'm learning is that there's been no major evolution in the meta, which confirms that we have entered the stagnation phase. So I recently made a video about the 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 metagame life cycle, and the stagnation phase is pretty much the last stage of evolution of the meta. And the stagnation phase is the phase where things are not really evolving that much. Things are pretty much stagnating. It's pretty much the same deck that are being played. So obviously when you are in the stagnation phase, you want to be in a very diverse meta, which is currently the case. We have a very, very diverse meta. Tons of deck can be played. The meta is still very, very diverse, but it's not evolving. It's the same deck that we're saying being played to various degrees and having various success. And you cannot really draw any conclusion to, oh yeah, this one is the best, this one is the best. But all those decks are seeing play, all those decks are pulling performances. So we are very much in this stagnation phase. Another thing we've learned is that Boba Yellow seems better positioned than Boba Green in the current meta, because we had pretty much 50-50 in terms of appearance in the meta. We've seen as many Boba Yellows as Boba Green, but Boba Yellow seems to have performed better, generally speaking. Not by a lot, which I think confirms my initial assumption that yes, Boba Yellow seems to be slightly better positioned, but if it is better, it is not by a lot. So it is interesting, but obviously Boba Yellow has some of the strongest performances that it had ever, and Boba is still very much the best deck in the game. If you guys wondered, yes, Boba, yeah, but whether you talk about Boba Yellow or Boba Green, the Boba is still very much the most represented deck in the game. Yes, it's a very diverse meta. It's far from invincible. But it is the best deck. It's the deck that consistently pulls up the biggest performances. My third observation is that Sabine Green remains more popular than Sabine Yellow, at least on those three tournaments. Sabine Green was more popular than Sabine Yellow, and even if you look at the datas on the store showdowns, Sabine Green remains more popular. But in terms of performance, they are both fairly similar. I was comparing the win rate, and it's fairly similar along the same lines. So at least on those tournaments. So it's quite unclear whether Sabine Green or Sabine Yellow is better. They're both good decks. I believe that Sabine Green would increase its matchup substantially against Control if they were playing UM Reinforcement, either in the main deck or in sideboard. This is kind of my personal opinion. And then finally, I forgot to finish to write the sentence, which is a bit awkward, but yeah, Boba Blue did not really pull any significant performance. It was not very played. I personally played against two Boba Blue on the last day of the tournament, and Boba Blue, and I won against both of them. Boba Blue did not manage to pull the performances. I still think it's a very strong deck. But so far it hasn't really been able to prove it. So we'll see, and we'll take a close look at the future tournament to see what Boba Blue is able to prove. But so far it's the newest deck that has appeared in the meta, and it hasn't really been able to pull off any significant results, at least this weekend. So now let's talk about my personal experience, because this is the first time I'm actually talking about a live tournament that happened in real life that I took part in. So I did not play in the first Friday tournament. I only played in Saturday and on Sunday. And this is my personal performance. So I went 5-2 in day one. So that's, remember, it was best of one. So the tournament started very, very badly for me. I lost two best of one right at the gate. And honestly, I could not have won those games. I just had horrible hands. And as I said, best of one is extremely unforgiving. You get a bad hand, you get a bad start, you probably don't fall. And then, despite going 5 games after, so final run 5-2, I managed to save the day, but it started very poorly for me. On day 2, I went 4-2, That was the best of three. This time we were on best of three. So here this time it went a little bit better. I was basically at 3-0, and then I lost 3-1. Um, and then I lost 3-1, and then I lost 3-2, and then I lost. I won my last game at 4-2, if I'm not mistaken. And um, I think it went pretty good. It's just the problem is like I felt so I lost basically to Chronic Grain was just a very bad matchup, and against an excellent player, so it was tough game. And and I lost against the Boba Green, and I think against the Boba Green, I think I could have won. It was incredibly close, and I think that I really got very very unlucky on the third game. My opponent managed to pull like 3 overrunning barrage. He had everything you could imagine. It was just a horrible game for me. So yeah, tough luck. It happens. So went into 4-2. So obviously, so yeah, I was playing hand green, by the way, just so you wonder. And then so missing out on the top eight or prize with one game in both tournaments. So basically, I would have gone 5-1 day two. I would have got my prize. I would got a same 6-1 on day one. So I was just one game away on each tournament to get like a prize or to get a top eight. So that was a bit disappointing. So for me, it was overall a disappointing performance because I was so close from being able to do something good. But overall, it was a solid performance. I mean, I've lost way more games than I lost, and it was a pretty competitive environment. Obviously, it was very competitive because I think one of the big reasons why this tournament was gathered so many strong players is because we haven't had a lot of tournaments in Europe, to be honest, and no major big tournaments. Basically, we had a Twickenham tournament, and then after this, we basically got no big tournaments until UK Game Expo. So unlike the US where there's big tournaments every other week, it feels like in Europe, we really don't have that many very big tournaments like that. So, and also in Europe, obviously, it's a much more confined space, so almost also a lot more densely populated. So it's quite easy for people to fly around, which means that whenever there's going to be a tournament, you can be sure that all the best players are going to be joining. Not all of them, but like a lot of them. So it creates this very heavy concentration of good players, and since we don't have that many of the tournaments, it also makes it so there's a lot of people who take part in it. So that was definitely a very competitive environment, despite the tournament structure to not be so competitive, and I'll talk about this right after. So Joe, for our people who are wondering, this is what I was playing. My hand green list. A couple of changes that I've made is I'm playing 3 Change of Hearts, 1 in the main deck, 2 in the sideboard, because I've realized that my worst matchups are the Palpatines, the Vaders, the Krennics, and Change of Heart really helps in those matchups, and also quite good against control, by the way. I also decided to exclude some of the more situational cards, so I don't play Vanguard Ace or V-Wing anymore, because I decided I was aiming for consistency rather than powerfulness, and this is why I decided to go with 2 Syndicate Lackeys in the main deck in order to improve my aggro matchup a little bit more, and also helps against the Boba, so I figure it's like a slightly more optimal. And this allowed me to save space in the sideboard, which allows me to play a third copy of Body Rogue to further improve my control matchup after sideboard. And also, and then I had a last slot which I thought a lot about it, and basically my thought process is like, what is the best card that I can include in my deck that can improve my matchup versus aggro? And I thought a lot about it, and I realized that as far as like a unit that would work well with U-Wing reinforcement, I thought that Chewbacca would be the best. So anti aggro card, and I felt like it did pretty well. It's also not bad versus Boba. So I was pretty happy about this. As given an extra card against aggro, and that's basically has been my list. Quite different from the other hand lists we've seen. And I'm definitely going to be trying those new school kind of Han Solo decks and see how they performs. But that's currently is been the current version. At least I understand it very well, so I know how to play it well, which is definitely a benefit. Next, I would just want to talk about the tournament in general and talk about the negative. I'm going to start with the negative first. First of all, I will never play a best of one event again. Like, meaning I'm not going to fly over to a different countries and pay for flight tickets and all that stuff to play a best of one event, because for me it's too random. It's you come here and you get unlucky and you're out of the tournament. It's exactly what happened to me because of a couple of bad hands, and it's very volatile, it's very random, and it doesn't feel good. So hopefully the official structures from OP structure from FFG will come out, which will standardize the tournament across the board and force everybody to play by the same rules. But here I will never fly to a best of one event. If my locals organize a best of one event, that's fine. I'll go there. But if I'm going to go out there, spend some money and go through the effort of flying over to different countries to play an event, I don't want to be playing a best of one event. I find it incredibly frustrating, and it's just definitely not my cup of tea. So never again. Personally, I would have preferred a bigger event over 2 days than two smaller events. In this case, that was three smaller events. And the reason is because it creates those very weird situation where it's a very big tournament, right? We're talking about tournaments of 128 players, and there's very few rounds to make the top cut, to get into prize pool. And so you end up in a situation where you have to have insane records to be able to gain anything. And I thought that was a bit weird. So for example, the fact that you had to go like 6-1 in the best of one event to be able to get prize, to be able to make top 8 and to have a prize, that is ridiculous. It's like I don't know if you realize how hard it is in a best of one event to just lose once. Like it makes the event so incredibly random. So I didn't like that personally. I would have preferred a bigger tournament over multiple days and maybe spread out the reward a bit more, um, to be a bit more focused on to have a bit more of a progressive structure. So for example, in something I really like in the American tournaments is that they reward top 16 instead of top 8. Um, and of course they give bigger reward in the top 8, obviously, but then top 16 still get something. While here you get ninth position, you get nothing. Well, on day 2 that was different. Is like you just needed a 5-1 record to be able to get a prize. So, but still find this a little bit weird. For example, on day 2, even to be, if you were 5-1, you were not even guaranteed um, to make top 8, which is incredible. Like it was very difficult. So I'm not a big fan of that. I would rather something a bit more forgiving. For example, in the even in big American tournaments, you make 6-2, you still make it to top 16, you still can get top cut. It's a lot more forgiving. While this one was very punishing, and I didn't like so much. And then finally, my last complaint would be about the judging. We talked about the Eduardo controversy, but there were other instances where the judges were not really on top of things and they were not very experienced. So this one, it's not really hard to put it on the organization because it's hard to find judges for games that are not super insanely popular, like Magic the Gathering or Yu-Gi-Oh. Like it's hard to find judges, and there's no proper judge structure from FFG, so it's hard to find good judges for games like for those games. But there were some judge calls that were just so unbelievably bad. So hopefully this improves when the judge structures is organized by FFG. Once again, all those negatives hopefully will be corrected whenever we get to the nitty-gritty, when we get to the official OP structure from FFG, hopefully. But of course, I also want to talk about the positives, and the positive was the great coverage. OP is really good at doing those coverages. Like the stream was amazing, great quality. I didn't watch it for day 2 and day 3, but I watched it for day 1, and the commentators did. I had one of my friends, Hal, was on casting the tournament. I think he did an amazing job, and they really did a great job at covering the event. Once again, perfect. The amount of data that we get from this tournament, like we know every single matchups. We can really follow the tournament very easily. This is amazing. I've never seen such great details in the data from other games, so that was really great. Overall, I also think the tournament was very well organized. Everything went according to schedule. There were a couple of repairs, but overall it was very well organized. Another very big positive, of course, the community was absolutely awesome. It was, for me, one of the first times that I get to meet the community since that I've started to my YouTube channel, the wider community than just around outside of Ireland, which is where I currently live. So it was amazing to meet some of the subscribers in real life. some people who follow my channel, some people that I've coached during my coaching service, to be able to see them in real life and interact with them. That was amazing. Everybody was so nice, and I hope that everybody had as much of a good experience playing against me that I had playing against them, because I had really a blast playing. I didn't have any issues with any players I've encountered whatsoever. It was just a great time, and I felt like so that was really nice. Though the community is absolutely awesome as far as I've seen personally, as far as I expanded. Everybody's very kind to me. I also get to, as you can see on the picture, I also get to meet the Star Wars Unlimited designer, take a picture with them. That was also great. We could also go to the Star Wars Unlimited booth to talk to developers and pick up some promos and stuff. That was nice. Another very good positive was that you could play the tournament and still enjoy the con and without dropping. So I try to not drop from tournament as much as possible, because tournament is a great opportunity to get better at the game. So I usually do not drop out from tournament even if I'm out, um, unless I'm really particularly tilted, which I try not to be, at least not to be on the long run. And but the good thing is, like, you could basically, tournament will start at 9 and you will be done by basically 1, 2 o'clock. Um, by 1 or 2 o'clock, and still you'll be able to have the entire afternoon to enjoy the convention. It was I don't know, you can game Expo is a board game convention. There's tons of stuff to see and stuff. You can also take part in side events. Unfortunately, side events, they didn't have cards product for day 2, so they couldn't run side events on day 2, which is unfortunate. I think it's mostly because they decide. I don't understand why they give the option for people to do sealed. I think draft should be the only format you should allow, because not because draft is better than sealed, even though it is. It's mostly because draft requires twice less product. For every sealed you make, you can do 2 drafts. So I think it would be a lot better for everybody if people were playing drafts, so then everybody get to play, instead of having some people play sealed and then having people being denied the option to play at all, because some people play sealed and took all the product from themselves. So I think it would be better for the future, for side events, to organize only draft as side events, because Twin Suns and draft, because sealed just takes too much product, especially if you're limited in product. Anyway, so yeah, you had time to basically drop from the tournament, because the tournament was short enough, which is due to the best of one structure. With that being said, I think you could still do, if you do a tournament over 2 days, you could still do a best of 3 tournament over 2 days and have like take it only half a day, so then people can enjoy the convention. So I think that you should have done that. This is what I would have preferred personally. Anyway, sorry for this very, very long video. There were a lot to say about this event. Let me know if you are one of those players and you have some more things to say about your own deck, or things that I've said in the video that is not quite accurate. Please feel free to correct me. And thank you everybody for taking up for taking part of this event. It was a really good time, and I will post the schedule for my coaching services in the comments below. And I will open in a new week to be filled as well. So thank you so much for supporting me, and if you like the video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time, or maybe see you in real life in one of the upcoming events. Bye bye, and see you.